What's up, YouTube? Right now, I have a special guest. I mean, for the last 20 plus years, airport to airport, ring to ring, he's been doing his thing. A former cruiserweight champion and a soon-to-be X Division champion. I'm talking about the one and only TJP.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to be on. So what's going on?
I appreciate you being here. Now, how's your 2020 been going so far? I mean, I know this world's been a little chaotic, to say the least.
Little bit. I mean, for me, it's been relatively normal. The volume of work is a little less, which is nice because last year is probably the busiest year I think I've ever had. So it provided me a little bit of rest, but I think I've still had something like 60 dates or so like throughout the year, just because, you know, with like Impact and New Japan tapings and things like that. MLW just taped a block recently. And now, like with the world, you know, opening up over the last month or two, well, mostly the country, the rest of the world is mostly open, but but with us starting to follow suit now, like I've had a bunch of you know, independent third-party dates pop up, so you know, it's starting to get more busy again, but it's been relatively busy all year, but manageable, you know.
That's great to hear. I mean, I'm looking around that room that you're in right now. There's a lot of stuff that's up there that has to do with your career and whatnot. So what's like the favorite piece that you have?
God, I don't know that I really have a favorite necessarily, but you know, it's funny. A lot of this stuff for so many years was really just boxed up. I was never really like big on doing anything with it. And it was kind of my family really that sort of encouraged me to put stuff up, you know. I thought maybe that's probably time, I guess. I think maybe God, I don't know. I really like this poster right here in the back. This was from CMLL when I was there when I was 18. Shortly after I debuted in Japan, I went over to Mexico and I lived there most of 2003. And I had gotten my start in Mexico, like doing border hopping shows, you know, LA to Tijuana when I was like, you know, 13, 14 years old in like 98, 99. And this is a poster I ripped off the wall of like in an alleyway. Because in Mexico, it's like, you know, they have wrestling 7 nights a week. It's kind of like a time warp down there. You know, Lucha Libre hasn't changed much from what it was in like, say, like the 40s and 50s to what it is now. Like, it's wrestling down there is a lot more timeless. So it's pretty cool. You can walk down the street and there's still like, you know, posters like this, like old style ones plastered on the wall of that night's card. It's almost like what boxing was to America in like the 1930s, right? Like you walk down the street and it's like James Braddock versus whoever, like outside the garden, you know. So I grabbed this off the wall. I thought it was really cool. It was one of the shows we headlined, I think, in Pachuca, which is usually, I think, the Thursday night show. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, kind of emblematic of our time down there. And it was, that's probably my favorite little piece in the room is that, just having that little poster. So
that's great. So I'm seeing a Cruiserweight Championship. I'm seeing that won the TNA X Division titles, but what soon might be there is Impact Wrestling X Division Championship, because next week, or depending on when this comes out, you have a big championship match coming up. And now, since you're in Impact Wrestling, not necessarily TNA, there's a really big difference in like the talent that you see there with Chris Bay, Trey Miguel, and even the champion himself. So what's the difference for you between TNA's X Division back in like 2013 or today's X Division in Impact Wrestling in 2020?
Well, you know, it's funny because like you had asked a bit ago about like my favorite piece in the room of all this stuff that, you know, for my career over the years. And a lot of times everybody always gets fixated on this. Obviously, like they look really nice or whatever, but when I think of the two, and as much as I love the Cruiserweight title, obviously now that is going to go on to sort of like be a sort of an important footnote in like wrestling history as far as like the changes in progression. Like, you know, Cruiserweight's coming back in 2016, big deal, you know. But I always felt like, to me, the X Division title was more meaningful because it's almost like what the Intercontinental title was. Like when I started wrestling and when I was younger, the Cruiserweight division in WCW was like a barometer for a lot of fans. That's what got a lot of people in. And it's like, you know, you hear, you know, Eddie and Benoit and Malenko and Jericho, all these guys for years, they would say, hey, we meet fans all the time that are like, man, you in the cruiserweight division got me into wrestling. You know, Rey Mysterio and like these guys, I hear from that all the time. Of course, they all go on to be like world champions and do other stuff, but they always hear from that generation. There's a whole generation that like found wrestling from the cruiserweight division.
Yeah.
And for me, I came to find that I would meet so many people that they would tell me, you know, fans that are like 22, 23 years old, and they would tell me like, man, I grew up watching you in the X division when you were Puma and AJ Styles and Petey Williams and all these guys. And it didn't occur to me until probably around 2013, 14, something like that, that like, man, like when I first came to TNA in 2003 and that X division throughout the mid 2000s, like that became this thing that ushered in a whole generation of fans. And the X division title was kind of like the Intercontinental title in that for years, like wrestling fans, you know, we looked at the Intercontinental title like that's like the wrestler's title, like the really good guys get that. Like, yeah, if you are great for business, you'll be a world champion, and they're all great wrestlers, sure, but it always felt like that was the working man's title, was the Intercontinental title. So I feel like, I feel like this last couple decades, the X Division title has sort of been that, because you think about it, it's like Joe, AJ, Christopher Daniels, you know, all these guys that like have gone on to all be important figureheads in the next generations of wrestling. And so I've always taken a lot of pride in having been part of that, and then even being part of the later generation, and then being part of the current generation. And I honestly, it's so funny because like you look back on it and it's, I guess hindsight like changes things, you know, you look at things through rose-colored glasses, but at the time, you know, AJ wasn't AJ at the time. He became AJ because of that stuff. And so like, you know, I look at it when I was there at that time and we were all just young guys, like with a little bit of buzz and putting on some cool matches. And then all these dudes ended up going on to become superstars. And then, you know, in 2013, a whole new generation of guys came in, and same thing. Like then they started to become superstars. You see like DJ Z's in WWE now. And, you know, like, so now this current generation, I look at like Chris Bay, I look at, you know, Rohit, I look at Trey Miguel, I look at all these guys, Willie Mack, you know, you name it, all these people. And it's like, these guys, like, it feels exactly how any of the generations were. And I think the talent level now might be deeper than it's ever been. I mean, everybody in that locker room is amazing. To be honest, the entire locker room could be the X division. They're all really good. So I like it. I enjoy it. And I think that's for me, that's one of the selling points as far as me wanting to like play for that team, is that, you know, they have such a deep roster.
That's great. That's great. Looking at like the early parts of your career for myself and a lot of other people, when we first found out that you were like TJP or TJ Perkins was after you take off the suicide suit. So back in 2013, like Austin Aries stole the suit from you and you were brought onto the stage with Hulk Hogan. At that time, were you ready to not be Suicide and to just be TJ Perkins? And also, how was it working with like an icon like Hulk Hogan?
I don't know. You know, I don't think anybody's ever really ready for anything. It's kind of like being a parent. You know, like people tell you you're never going to be ready to be a parent. You'll be ready when it happens, like that sort of thing. And so, you know, up to that point, you know, I had been Puma, I had been like a lot of different masked characters, you know, and Suicide was no different. Although Suicide was cool because I got to take on something that was already created property and sort of make it my own. But I do think that it was about time for me to start being myself. I was finally starting to like mature physically, I think a little bit, and like, you know, could express myself better than when I was like a teenager. Like when I was younger, I had raw talent for all this, but it doesn't, like young Kobe, raw talent doesn't mean he's necessarily ready to lead a team up here, you know, like high IQ, sure, but maybe the maturity level is like super low, like that sort of thing. So like when I was younger, it's like I could do the job really well, but I was a kid, you know, I didn't really know what I was doing. I think around that time, it was about the right time for me to branch out and start adding layers and, you know, incorporating what I had learned over the previous 15 years of my career. And Hulk Hogan was amazing. I mean, being able to sit with him in a room before shots that we would shoot, and like, you know, before or going into the ring, and just seeing how he operates as far as being able to present a segment to the people and to express himself and tell a story with little nuances. I mean, I remember being in between takes of like a backstage shot and thinking, wow, like I learned a lot just from seeing how he handled that first shot. And like, I could literally see how he operates and brings up the people around him in the room. And as a human being, he's cool as hell. I mean, he's one of the boys. He's very laid back. He gets along with everybody. He wasn't, I think everybody has, for that time, like they kind of saw him as like this bullheaded administrator. Like maybe he had like a lot of pull and sway and things. And I mean, I remember coming out of the locker room for like a production meeting, and he was walking out just like we were and asking us, hey guys, what time is the meeting? I don't know what's going on. And I remember just thinking, dude, you're like Babe Ruth, you're the greatest of all time, and you're sitting here like just like one of us. Like you don't know anymore, and you just want to like get along and do your thing. I always thought he was really cool to work with, very easy to learn from, and amazingly down to earth for who he is. You know, you think about like in history, the amount of like entertainers, or I guess, you know, in this case, like athletes that are recognizable universally. And there's not many. I mean, you think Muhammad Ali, any continent, you recognize him. Yeah. Michael Jordan. Yeah. Like you put him anywhere, you'll recognize Michael Jordan. And Hulk Hogan's like probably on that short list. If you had to pick 3 or 5 guys, nobody doesn't recognize. I mean, if you think of pro wrestling and you're not a wrestling fan, he's the first thing that pops into your head is Hulk Hogan. So I think that knowing how otherworldly he could be with people, but being around him and the way he works with people, like you could be a young nobody like I was, or you could be Sting, and you get the exact same experience. And how down to earth he was. It's like, wow, dude, like there's only a handful of people that could probably play the I'm like different than everybody else card, and you don't. Like I thought that's pretty cool. Like he would be like boarding Southwest flights. Oh, wow. like just like anybody else. And I remember like our seamstress, Jolene is her name. She joked, because they're both Tampa people. Jolene's from Tampa, Hogan's from Tampa. And she laughed one day. she was telling me this story. They were on our way to or from TV tapings, and the company had booked him on a Southwest flight, just like a bunch of the other roster members, just not really thinking of it, you know? And like Hogan didn't even question it. He's just like, oh, okay, here's my flight info. I'll take this flight. He had never taken Southwest before. He doesn't even know how it works. So she said she saw him. He's standing there kind of like not knowing what to do at the boarding area, because it's not different, or it's not the same. Like you don't get an assigned seat. So you have to like stand in a line and all that. Yeah. And he just got in the line like everybody else, just stood in line.
Hulk Hogan, just walking in line.
Just being super like chill. And then she was like, you can't stand in this line. Like, yeah, everybody's staring, you know. So she had to take him to the front desk and be like, you need to board this guy like separate. He's going to be a big disturbance. Like, cause he doesn't understand that he can't just fit in like this. So I always look to that story, and that's like sums up my idea of him at the time, is that he's just, you know, he was super cool to work with. And, he had no idea like what he is for everybody else. Like he thinks he's just a normal guy like everybody else. And it's like, dude, you're not, you're Babe Ruth, man. Like,
yeah. So like you worked in that TNA locker room with the guys like Samoa Joe and Hulk Hogan and AJ Styles. What's the difference between that locker room of TNA and then the current of Impact Wrestling? And why should more fans like watch Impact Wrestling nowadays? Because a lot of people decide to kind of turn the switch off when they really should be turning back on and watching what's in front of them.
Well, I mean, the production setup is really the thing. Distribution deals. I mean, that's really what it's all about. I mean, in the beginning, 2003 till, you know, whenever it was 2013, 14, you know, it was on Spike TV. For a brief period, it was Fox Sports. So it spent a decade, for the most part, in this entertainment space where it was like what AEW is now on a big network and something that's easy to find. Spike TV's on, you know, in every household and stuff like that. So with that, the aura of the show and the expectations are higher and it's different. It changes the morale. I wouldn't say it's a good or bad thing. It just changes, I guess, the intensity of it, you know.
I see what you're talking
A good example would be when I was in WWE, for example, before SmackDown moved, you know, SmackDown, which wasn't always live, had this aura about it on a Tuesday that it wasn't as stressful as Raw was. And I remember thinking like, dude, it's still, because being a cruiserweight, I had the unique experience of being on both rosters kind of, because I had to go to Raw because I would do stuff on Raw all the time, but then I also had to do 205 on SmackDown. So I was in both locker rooms and it was so mind-blowingly different. You show up on Raw, everybody's stressed out, so stressed out, because it's looked at as this is the weekly live show. It's always live, big spotlight, big network, a lot of pressure. And then you go to Tuesdays, and even when it was live, people still had this idea like, well, this is the second show. This is, you know, it's a taped show. It's it's not the other one. And so everybody's relaxed and chilled out. And so I feel like when it was like, you know, Destination America and like Pop TV era, because it got off of that bigger national stage, like it felt more like relaxed and chilled out. And honestly, that is kind of how the morale went. Like a lot of the guys that were disgruntled the first 10 years, a lot of that changed. People had a lot more fun sometimes during the down years, because it just seemed like there was like less pressure. And now, you know, it's kind of in the in-between space. It's not quite, I think, Spike TV, obviously, but it's not like in the previous space where the distribution was like kind of shaky and few and far between. And so there's an odd mix of, you know, we feel pressure to do well, but we're all having fun. Like nobody feels like there's nobody feels like you're in the guillotine, I guess, so to speak, which is good, because that's how I never feel stressed personally. Like I don't know, like I never get nervous or things or anxious. So I feel better when other people don't feel that way, you know, and it's nice because it's a great atmosphere.
Yeah, like it's a good like working environment. But you've been wrestling for, again, like 22 years, I think it is. And that's older than me. I'm 21 years old, and I can't believe that's crazy. Like you think of like guys that have 20-year careers, then your Undertakers, or 20+ careers, like Undertakers and Triple H's, etc. But what's been the biggest challenge and biggest reward of being a pro wrestler for so long?
I think I'm starting to realize that I mean, I always realized that my age was going to be an advantage. To me, I always felt like, okay, it just means I'll have a longer shelf life. That's what it meant to me when I was younger. Yeah, I didn't have the foresight to kind of see that, you know, later on, I'm going to have such a massive amount of experience and education at such a young age. And now I'm sort of like being shown that. Like when I first went to WWE, Hunter had pulled me aside during the CWC before like I was signed or there was an offer or anything on the table. One of the first things he said to me was, he asked me if I would want to be a producer and a coach there someday. And that, you know, my mind for my age is extremely valuable. I would have just done it then. I'm not that big on myself. I don't need to keep wrestling. I don't need to be like a star or like a figure of the show or anything. So I told him, I'll just do this now if you want. He said, no, we want you to wrestle, but, you know, consider that. And that was kind of the first time that I thought, you know, now I'm starting to reach this space where my experience and age are meeting at the same time. You know, I'm now in like my prime years. You know, for wrestling, your prime years is like your 30s, you know, basically. And so I was hitting my prime years and my experience was like 20 years. Most people don't have that. And, you know, it started to become apparent that, especially with me being around so long, being around older producers who are now in their 60s, 70s, you know, they have such amazing things to teach you. But I look around the room and I see young guys and they don't want to hear it because they're like, listen, old fool, you're 7 years old. I ain't having that. So I started to see the value in that. You know, I have that same experience to pass on, but this is coming in a 30-something-year-old package, not a 70-something-year-old package. So that message coming from me, even though it's the exact same message, coming from me, somebody will take it seriously. So I've started to, I guess, mature into being more of a leader and trying to help out more, which I've grown to enjoy. You know, I did a lot of coaching last year when I was traveling outside of WWE. You know, for the first time, I hadn't been a free agent, you know, out of TNA and out of WWE for, God, it seemed like almost 10 years, you know, 7 years or whatever it was. So, yeah, I was able to kind of coach and do all that. So that really, that's kind of what the experience has meant to me, is that, like, you know, being at such a young age, I'm able to translate a message to other people and help other people in ways that some people can't, just because of their age gap, you know.
That's true. That's true. So ever since like you left WWE and like you're now in Impact Wrestling and wrestling just about everywhere that you'll go. Now you're currently the C3W World Champion. That's a DMV promotion for people that don't know, DC, Maryland, Virginia. If you could defend that title against anyone in this area that you know of, who would you decide to defend it against?
Oh, the first thing that came to mind, actually, just because, well, two people came to mind, actually, but just for that area, one, my good buddy Rich Swann, just because, you know, being a Northeast guy and like kind of more closer to that area, and mostly like that crew and you know, that generation.
Yeah.
That's one. And then also Ruckus as well. You know, those are two that popped into my head. Ellsworth, just so I can beat his ass. He's a good buddy. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the first thing that popped into my head, is just like you know, kind of thinking of guys that have come through that area, and just that, you know, it's an important thing for certain regions to have, you know, staple points that become a barometer for them. And, you know, I see this as that sort of thing. So the other side of that is being able to do that with new people that people haven't heard of, you know, and also being able to bring in people that are sort of on the come up, that, you know, aren't necessarily at a next level yet as far as perception, but like that are kind of carrying the current generation. People like, you know, the Blake Christians, Jordan Olivers, like guys like that. Like, I think it's important to kind of have an eclectic mix of people that, like, you know, like I said, like my personal take was, I was thinking of, like, especially being around so long, all the guys that have come through there, and especially ones that are still around, and then, you know, guys that are coming up and like making waves and bringing them as part of it, because that's how you progress. That's how you make a region better. And then of course, probably most importantly, is guys that are regional and haven't been seen, because there's so much talent out there. And honestly, the talent level is so razor thin, the difference between everybody's talent. It's just that not everybody has the same platform to show it. So it's like being able to think about the possibilities of helping guys sort of almost get discovered and for their talent to show out. Like, to me, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's important to bring up like the next generation of wrestlers. But for like the younger guys and girls that are getting into the business, I know personally, I just started training about a month ago. What's like the best thing for them to know getting into the business? Not just knowing the mechanics that's inside the ring, but how to navigate yourself to have a career like yours that's 20 plus years long.
I mean, the Joker, right? If you're good at something, never do it for free. And what I mean by that is, like, people need to be able to understand how to handle themselves from a point of business, and to understand their role in that. And it's not like, I caution people to not see that on the surface as like us versus them sort of mentality, because that's not what it is. I mean, essentially, everything is sort of like a poker game. So it is going to kind of be you versus anybody else. But to look at it as to, you know, in the sense of like protect yourself and to give yourself more credit, you know, and holding that line helps, you know, as you go and as you learn. You know, of course, you get experience, you branch out and all that. But throughout that, holding your line as a business person, and understanding how to be an entrepreneur, how to have multiple streams of income within this business, whether it's, digital content, or, like Patreons or YouTube channels or streaming channels, or, your merchandise. And then of course your wrestling, like all these things are just that right there is already 3, 4, 5 different avenues of income just off of this occupation alone. And understanding the possibilities, the capabilities, understanding your worth and how that will adjust as you go on, and holding that line so that way, you hold yourself accountable, because you know what your bottom line is, and you learn how to be a good business person. And it takes a lot of failure to understand that. So there's gonna be a lot of times you kind of eat crap, learning how to be better at that. But then also it holds other people accountable with you and with themselves too, because now everybody's thinking along the same lines. Then the quality of shows go up, because then, promotions aren't trying to like skate by on stuff. They invest in it properly, and then they treat you like a business person. They treat you like a professional. So then you start performing like a professional more. You start treating yourself like a professional more. You treat your peers like a professional more. And now every level becomes more major league in scope. And I think that's really important to learn from the get-go. If I could have told myself that when I was, 15, 16 years old, I would have. But until I was like 23, I was just having fun. I didn't realize it. And honestly, that was like the biggest eye opener for me, because, from 17 years old on, I was like, New Japan, CMLL, I was Ring of Honor, TNA, all this stuff was coming up for me.
Yeah.
That was really good money for a young kid just out of high school, and at the time to not have understood business at all and not know what that means, and to just like, kind of like not blow it, but like to just sort of not appreciate it and sort of waste the opportunity and not build upon it. Like that's a decade of my career that I wasted not understanding that, just because I was too young. So, if there's any lesson, I would probably not caution people, but, express to people, like from the beginning, have fun doing what you're doing, go out, get experience, make the sacrifices, enjoy the journey, but understand that too, because the quicker you learn that, the earlier you learn that, your career is going to advance so much more, and you'll end up taking care of yourself and all of your peers and all of your, administrators in a much better way.
Wow, that's great. I'm gonna write that one down later. But I guess for the final question, since you mentioned the word Major League, you recently got announced for Major League Wrestling. You also got announced for New Japan to be part of the SJ Cup or Super J Cup. What's your goals in competing in this tournament? Also, what's your goals in going into MLW? What do you have your eyes set on?
I mean, MLW is sort of a blank slate for me. They have me paired up with Buku Dao, which is pretty cool. I like, excuse me. I like having pairings like that, because it gives me the opportunity to, I think, use different tools and like kind of use my knowledge in different ways, and sort of like help others out. But I've always thought that MLW had such an eclectic mix of talent, and like their view of wrestling is more sporty than some of the other places. It's almost like Ring of Honor, but with a broader sense of who to bring in. And Ring of Honor is a little bit more narrow in what they view talent as for their roster and building a show, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, that's more their style. They're a little bit more filtered in that way. But like MLW, like there's so much lucha libre, there's so much, Japanese talent and all this international talent, and they come from all over. Like there's really no like affiliated lines with them. It's like the Wild West. So it's like such a blank slate. So that's why I enjoy working there, is because those shows, like the mix of talent is so incredibly diverse. You have a lot of young guys who that's their first experience on a major league type of production, like an upper level production. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the other places don't give opportunities so liberally to young talent. MLW doesn't filter them out that much, so you get a lot of young, exciting guys that come in, and then, you get a lot of cool international talent. And like I said, without like company lines and affiliations, like they bring in a lot of different talent. So that's pretty cool. The Super J Cup, I'm honestly just honored to be part of it. I mean, this is the second year in a row that I've done it. And that's the type of thing I never thought I'd be able to do. And I've said it for years. My WrestleMania moment was being in the Super J Cup. That's all I ever wanted to do. When I was first understood that wrestling could be a career for me when I was like 11, 12 years old, and thinking, okay, like I could do this when I grow up. I can actually do this. How do I do it? Like that sort of thing. At that time, I was so absorbed with the mid 90s junior division in Japan and like Michinoku Pro and all these guys, and the Super J Cup 94, 95, like was so big to me. And they don't have many of them. You know, they had 94, 95, I think 2000, then 2004. And I mean, there had only been like 5 or 6 of them prior to last year. Like it's the lowest ratio tournament on like a major league platform. It's so rare. And it's such a short list of people that get to do it. It's even shorter the amount of North Americans that get to do it.
Yeah.
And to be part of that club and to be part of that group in history that, you know, Guerrero did it, Malenko did it, Benoit did it, Jericho did it. You know, there's not many others that got to do it. Christopher Daniels did it as Curryman. So to have been part of that, knowing that they don't do it so often, that's amazing to me. And last year was great. You know, the finals were in Los Angeles, and I got to be in the finals, or not in the finals, but on the final night in LA, my hometown. I was shared a team with Liger, and you know, he was wrapping up his final shows for his career. And so to kind of be part of the closing night on Super J Cup in my hometown on Liger's team, in the match with them, and to get the win and all that is really special to me. And so being part of it this year is amazing. And I think it's the most diverse lineup that they've ever had. You know, the unique opportunity of having so many travel restrictions, like the Super Juniors has like no people in it. Yeah. So the Super J Cup is super limited because we don't have the same mix of people. Like both of them are kind of 2 halves of like one group basically. But, you know, like Leo, first time in it. And that's another guy too, also from that I thought of, like pertaining to your previous question. He's another guy. ACH back in New Japan. Chris Bay getting his first opportunity to break out. You know, Ray Horace from Mexico representing, you know, I don't even know if he's contracted anywhere, but like, you know, representing obviously Mexican wrestling and representing, you know, a totally different demographic. And Blake Christian, who's coming up, he's a kind of a hot name right now, like for this current generation of indie guys, you know, and being able to carry the GCW label with him into the Jacob, that's pretty big. You know, that gets a lot of attention for GCW. And then, you know, to be part of that group, and Clark Connors, you know, from LA Dojo, like it's an incredibly diverse group, not just with people's backgrounds, but like with the amount of talent. Everybody has a different education in wrestling in that group. So I think that it's going to be really exciting.
It really is. But I guess we're going to wrap it up right there. I'm going to be respectful of your time. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And where can they find you on social media if they already don't find you or already don't follow you?
I don't have a whole lot, but you can find me on Twitter and on Instagram. Both are at Mega TJP. My Twitch streams it's also Mega TJP. And then I believe my Cameo, which I just finally got persuaded to open up, I believe they're all under the same name. So you can find me at those places. If you find a Facebook, I don't have one, so it might be run by my manager. So it's probably better to look at the other things, but that's really it. I'm kind of an old man as far as social media, so I'm not too crazy with all kinds of, I haven't got like a YouTube channel or like a TikTok or anything cool like that. So, but that's where you guys can find me. And my pro wrestling tees, if you guys want any merch during this time. I know obviously live events are down, so like not a lot of people can get merch and stuff like that. So for anybody looking for that, my pro wrestling tees is just under TJP. So that's it.
Well, there you go. Thank you guys for watching the video. Really enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, share, and always subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one.
We going up like 1,000. I'm a flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. We going up like 1,000. I'm a flex just like a muscle man Malcolm. When it just like 1, 2, 3. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze. If you like the channel, this will squeeze.